What is the purpose of an accumulator in an aircraft hydraulic system? The accumulator holds pressure on the hydraulic fluid in the system. The pressure is held by compressed air or nitrogen acting on the fluid through a bladder, a diaphragm, or a piston. What is the purpose of an orifice check valve in an aircraft hydraulic system? An orifice check valve allows full flow of fluid in one direction through the valve, but restricts the flow in the opposite direction. Where are line disconnect fittings normally located in an aircraft hydraulic system? Normally in the lines that connect the engine-driven pump to the aircraft hydraulic system. What is meant by a single-action hydraulic actuating cylinder? A linear actuating cylinder that uses hydraulic fluid under pressure to move the piston in one direction. The piston is returned by a spring. What is the source of compressed air that is used in a medium-pressure pneumatic system on a turbine engine-powered aircraft? This air is normally bled from one of the stages of the engine compressor. What kind of device is used to control the speed of movement of the piston in a pneumatic actuator? A variable orifice. Why do most high-pressure pneumatic systems include a moisture separator? When the pressure of the stored air is reduced to the value that is needed in the system, the temperature drops enough to freeze any water that is in the air. The moisture separator removes this water before it can freeze and block the system. What is the difference between an open center selector valve and a closed center selector valve? Open center selector valves are installed in series with each other, and the hydraulic fluid flows through their center when no component is being actuated. The valves act as a pump unloading valve. Closed center selector valves are installed in parallel with each other. They direct fluid under pressure to one side of the actuator and the fluid from the other side of the actuator to the system return manifold. In their off position, they trap fluid in the lines between the valve and the actuator. What is used to flush a hydraulic system that uses Skydraw hydraulic fluid? Trichloroethylene. What is used to flush hydraulic system that uses mineral-based hydraulic fluids? Naphtha, Varsol, or Stoddart solvent? Where can you find the type of hydraulic fluid that is required for a particular aircraft? In the maintenance manual for the aircraft. This information is also on a placard on the system reservoir. What is used to remove phosphate ester-based hydraulic fluid from aircraft tires? Soap and water. What must be done to lines that are disconnected when servicing an aircraft hydraulic system? They must be capped with the correct fluid line cap or plug. Masking tape or other types of adhesive tape should never be used. What are two aircraft hydraulic reservoirs? Ways may be pressurized by an aspirator in the fluid return line or by bleed air from one of the engine compressors. Why do some hydraulic pressure gauges have a snubber installed between them and the hydraulic pump? The snubber keeps the gauge from fluctuating. Environmental systems. What are two main gases that make up our atmosphere? Nitrogen and oxygen. Why are the cabins of most turbine-powered aircraft pressurized? These aircraft fly at such high altitudes that supplemental oxygen would be needed for the occupants if the cabins were not pressurized. Where does the pressurizing air come from on most turbine-powered aircraft? From bleed air from one of the engine compressors. Where does the pressurizing air come from on most of the smaller reciprocating engine-powered aircraft? From the engine turbocharger. What determines the amount of pressurization that an aircraft can use? The structural strength of the aircraft cabin. How is cabin pressure controlled in a pressurized aircraft? More pressure than is needed is pumped into the aircraft cabin, and the pressure controller modulates the outflow valve to maintain the correct pressure in the cabin. What is meant by isobaric mode of cabin pressurization? The isobaric mode of cabin pressurization is the mode that keeps the cabin altitude constant as the aircraft changes its flight altitude. What is meant by the constant differential mode of cabin pressurization? After the pressure in the aircraft cabin reaches the maximum value that is allowed by structural considerations, the constant differential mode of operation is the mode that holds the pressure inside the cabin a constant amount above the outside air pressure. What is the function of the cabin outflow valve on a pressurized aircraft? The cabin outflow valve, which is controlled by the pressure controller, maintains the correct amount of pressure inside the cabin. What is the function of the cabin pressure safety valve on a pressurized aircraft? The cabin pressure safety valve prevents cabin pressure from exceeding the maximum allowable differential pressure. Why must pressurized aircraft have a negative pressure relief valve? The structure of an aircraft cabin is not designed to tolerate the inside pressure being lower than the outside pressure. What keeps the cabin of a pressurized aircraft from being pressurized when the aircraft is on the ground? A squat switch on the landing gear holds the safety valve open when the aircraft is on the ground. What are two types of air conditioning systems that may be installed on an aircraft? Air cycle systems and vapor cycle systems. Where does the warm air come from that is used to heat the cabin of a large jet transport aircraft? Warm engine compressor bleed air is used. Where does the warm air come from that is used to heat the cabin on most small single-engine reciprocating engine-powered aircraft? From a shroud around the engine muffler. Where does the fuel come from that is used in an aircraft combustion heater? From the aircraft fuel tanks. What happens to a combustion heater if the flow of ventilating air is restricted? If the ventilating air is restricted and the temperature reaches a preset value, the limit switch will cause the fuel to be shut off to the heater. How is the heat removed from an aircraft cabin with a vapor cycle air conditioning system? The cabin heat is absorbed by the refrigerant in the evaporator and it is carried outside the aircraft where it is given up to the outside air in the condenser. What produces the cool air in a vapor cycle air conditioning system? Warm cabin air is blown across the evaporator where its heat is transferred into the refrigerant. That air that leaves the evaporator is cool. Why must air cycle air conditioning systems incorporate a water separator? The rapid cooling of the air in the expansion turbine causes moisture to condense in the form of fog. This moisture is trapped in the moisture separator before the air is released into the cabin. What is used as a refrigerant in a vapor cycle air conditioning system? A freon liquid refrigerant known as refrigerant 12 or the more environmentally friendly R134A. What are three ways supplemental oxygen can be carried in an aircraft? As a high pressure gas in its liquid form or as a solid in the form of a chemical candle? What kind of gaseous oxygen must be used to service an aircraft oxygen system? Only aviators breathing oxygen. Hospital oxygen and welding oxygen contain too much moisture to be used. What is used to check an oxygen system for leaks? A special leak detector liquid that is in the form of non-oily soap. What is a continuous flow oxygen system? An oxygen system that continuously flows a metered amount of oxygen into the mask. What is a pressure demand oxygen system? An oxygen system that flows oxygen to the mask only when the wearer of the mask inhales. Above a specified altitude, the regulator meters oxygen under pressure into the mask when the wearer inhales. What identification must be stamped on an oxygen bottle that is carried in an aircraft? The identification .3AA or .3HT, the date of manufacture and the date of all the hydrostatic tests. Aircraft instrument systems. The instruments in an aircraft are connected to the static system. Are the airspeed indicator, the vertical speed indicator, and the altimeter. What types of repairs or alterations can be a certificated mechanic make to aircraft instruments? None. All repairs and alterations must be made by the instrument manufacturer or by an FAA-approved repair station certificated for the particular instrument. What is the significance of a red radial line on the dial of an aircraft instrument? A red radial line marks a never exceed condition. What is the yellow arc on the dial of an instrument? The yellow arc cautions range of operation. What is the significance of the green arc on an aircraft instrument? Indicates normal range of operation. What is the significance of the white arc on the aircraft indicator? White arc indicates airspeeds at which the flaps may be lowered. What is used to warn a mechanic that the glass on an aircraft instrument has slipped? A white slippage mark extends across the lower part of the instrument cover glass, and the instrument case bezel shows whether or not the glass has slipped. A slipped glass would put the range marks over the incorrect numbers. Where can a mechanic find the range markings that are required on the instruments of a particular aircraft? In the type certificate data sheets for the aircraft. What check must be made if a mechanic replaces any instrument that is connected to the instrument static system? The static system must be checked for leaks. Why are many of the electrical instruments mounted in a steel case? A steel case concentrates the flux produced by magnets in the instrument and keeps it from affecting other nearby instruments. Why must an aircraft instrument panel be electrically bonded to the primary aircraft structure? The bonding straps carry the return current from the instruments into the aircraft structure. What error is corrected when an aircraft compass is swung? Deviation error. What fluid is used in an aircraft magnetic compass? A special water-clear fluid that is similar to kerosene. What is the maximum amount of deviation error that is allowed when a magnetic compass is installed in an aircraft? 10 degrees. What is the maximum amount of leakage that is allowed when checking the static system for an aircraft that is operated under instrument flight rules? For an unpressurized aircraft, the system is checked with 1,000 feet indication on the altimeter. It must not leak more than 100 feet in 1 minute. For pressurized aircraft, the system is checked at the maximum certificated pressure differential of the cabin. It must not leak in 1 minute more than 2% of the equivalent altitude of the maximum differential pressure, or 100 feet, whichever is greater. Why must the length of the thermocouple leads not be altered when installing a cylinder head temperature indicator? The instrument operated by a thermocouple is a current measuring device. The resistance of the thermocouple and its leads must be kept at the value specified for the indicator. What should a manifold pressure gauge read when the engine is not operating? It should read barometric pressure. What is the difference between a 2-minute or a 4-minute turn and slip indicator? A 2-minute turn indicator gives a 1 needle width deflection for a standard rate of turn. That's 3 degrees deflection for a standard per second. A 4-minute turn indicator gives a 1 needle width deflection for a half standard rate of turn. That's 1.5 degrees per second. A 4-minute turn indicator has a doghouse shaped mark located 2 needles width away from the center. When the needle is lined up with the doghouse mark, the aircraft is making a standard rate turn. What is the difference between a turn and slip indicator and a turn coordinator? The turn slip indicator is sensitive about only the yaw axis, which is the vertical axis of the aircraft. A turn coordinator uses the canted gyro, which makes it sensitive about roll and yaw axes. What is used as the sensor in the fuel tank for an electronic type fuel quantity indicating system? A tubular capacitor which extends across the fuel tank from top to bottom. Why is a dual tachometer used on a single engine helicopter? One needle indicates the speed of the engine, the other indicates the speed of the main rotor. When the needles are married, the clutch is not slipping and the rotor is solidly engaged to the engine. In what units is the tachometer used on turbine engine calibrated? In percentage of takeoff RPM. What kind of system is used to measure the exhaust gas temperature of a turbine engine? An averaging system made up of a series of thermocouples arranged around the inside of the exhaust duct of the engine. What would likely cause the needle of an electrical oil temperature gauge to peg on the high side of the instrument dial? There's probably an open in the bulb circuit that is causing the instrument to see an infinite resistance. The higher the resistance of the bulb circuit, the further the needle moves across the dial. What is used as a flow meter for most of the small horizontally opposed fuel-injected aircraft engines? A pressure gauge that measures the pressure drop across the injector nozzles. What two sources of power are used to operate gyro instruments in an aircraft? They may be air operated either by suction or pressure, or they may be electrically operated. What is an annunciator panel in an aircraft? A single location that contains all of the warning and condition lights for the aircraft. This makes it easy for the pilot to monitor all the systems at a glance. What condition could cause a takeoff warning system to actuate? The takeoff warning system gives an RO warning when the power lever is advanced for takeoff, if the flight controls for the stabilizer, the flaps, and the speed brakes are in an unsafe condition for takeoff. What would cause the warning horn to sound when the throttles are pulled back, reducing the engine power for landing? The warning horn will sound if any of the landing gears are not down and locked.